At the end of 2015, there were over 1 million people living in the United States infected with human immunodeficiency virus, HIV. When it was first discovered, HIV, which can lead to an AIDS diagnosis, was seen as a death sentence. Those suffering from this disease became unwelcome in most parts of American society. That is, until a brave young man took up the fight to humanize the disease, to help people better understand it and support people who were infected. In 1988, speaking to over 8,000 educators, Ryan White, a 16-year-old high school student, encouraged them to, quote, make AIDS a disease, not a dirty word. Ryan White chose to turn his tragedy into triumph. Ryan White was born on December 6th, 1971, in Kokomo, Indiana. He was the first child of Jeannie and Wayne White. Not long after his birth, the doctors realized something was wrong. When Ryan was circumcised, the cut would not stop bleeding. The doctors diagnosed Ryan with hemophilia. Hemophilia is a disease caused by the mutation of the clotting factor VIII gene in blood. This means that when a person with hemophilia gets bumped or cut, their blood does not clot, causing them to bleed uncontrollably. As a result, people diagnosed with hemophilia need to be careful when doing activities like riding a bike or playing sports. To treat hemophilia, people will get a blood transfusion that contains the factor VIII gene. Factor VIII helps hemophiliacs blood clot so they won't bleed. If Ryan thought he was going to bleed, his family would have to drive to the hospital to get a transfusion to stop the bleeding. It was a transfusion of an infected batch of factor VIII that gave Ryan White AIDS. AIDS, or acquired immune deficiency syndrome, is a disease that destroys a person's immune system. People can contract AIDS from exposure to an infected person's bodily fluids. Infected blood, semen, vaginal or rectal fluids, and breast milk can all transmit the disease. Ryan had 12 transfusions from an infected batch of factor VIII. Even though doctors had started testing blood by this time, Ryan received an older batch that had not been tested for the disease. In December of 1984, Ryan became ill. He was coughing a lot and had trouble breathing. His mom took him to the hospital, where he had an x-ray that showed he had pneumonia in both lungs. The antibiotics prescribed to help him get better weren't working, so doctors took a biopsy of his lungs. It was then that Ryan was diagnosed with AIDS. His mother did not want to ruin what might have been his last Christmas, so she didn't tell him the news right away. When she did tell him, he said to her, "Let's just pretend I don't have it." Ryan didn't want people to pity him. He was given 3 to 6 months to live, and he was only 13 years old. Eventually, Ryan's pneumonia improved, and he felt well enough to go back to school. But when he tried to go back, the school would not let him return. People were scared that they could get AIDS by touching him, being near him, or touching something he had touched. Parents of his classmates were not going to let him back until they were sure that their kids could not get AIDS by casual contact. Ryan and his family were not welcome anywhere. No one would shake his hand at church. Stores would keep him out because people said he spit on vegetables and cookies. People said he urinated on the walls of public restrooms. Others said he bit people when he didn't get what he wanted. These rumors were untrue, of course, but that was just the beginning of his long fight. Though he was finally allowed to go back to school, many people in town disapproved. His locker was vandalized. People avoided touching him, squeezing against the walls when he walked by. Ryan's favorite math teacher publicly said that he didn't want Ryan to return. The parents of his science lab partner even started a new school to be away from him. The family home was shot at, leaving a bullet hole in their front window. Ryan and his family were clearly still not welcome. They decided to move to a town a few miles away called Cicero, Indiana. The school Ryan would be attending, Hamilton Heights High School, made no objections to Ryan coming to their school, partly due to the efforts of a young woman who was influenced by Ryan and his fight. Ryan's fight to attend school became nationally known. His story was in the newspapers and magazines of the time. He was on television. Though there were nearly 200 students in the United States at the time that had AIDS, Ryan's story was more widely known. This publicity is what helped Ryan turn his tragic diagnosis into a triumphant fight to put a human face on the AIDS virus. Jill Stewart was one of the first of many people he influenced. She was his neighbor in his new town of Cicero and the student body president at Hamilton Heights High School. Jill knew about Ryan's fight and took up his cause.
Because of a young girl named Jill Stewart who decided to bring in the medical experts and talk to the kids. And the kids went home then and educated their parents.
Her efforts made it so that students had no reason to fear AIDS or Ryan. Jill Stewart continued her work with Ryan to educate people about AIDS. She appeared on TV shows like Nightline and Sesame Street, testified before a presidential commission on AIDS, and earned the Enhancement of Public and Community Education Award for Surgical General C. Everett Koop for her work with Ryan. Her time with Ryan has also led her to her current career. Jill Stewart, now Dr. Jill Waybell, is a leading dermatologist known for her work with Kim Pho, the young girl seen badly burned in the famous picture from the Vietnam War. Working with Ryan has inspired Jill Stewart to serve others. Ryan was also a big influence on celebrities like Elton John, Elizabeth Taylor, and Michael Jackson. Elton John had seen Ryan on television and heard him say that he would most like to meet Elton. They did meet and soon became great friends. Elton John helped Ryan and his family through their fight, even buying the family's new home in Cicero. Ryan attended many of Elton John's concerts. More importantly, Ryan inspired Elton John to establish the Elton John AIDS Foundation. The foundation, established in 1992, continuing today, gives help by educating people about HIV/AIDS, AIDS prevention, and giving direct services and support to those dealing with HIV and/or AIDS. The foundation raised more than $300 million to fight HIV/AIDS. Michael Jackson, the king of pop, wanted to show people that AIDS wasn't something to be afraid of. He embraced Ryan in public to show others that they shouldn't be afraid of people with AIDS. He used his fame to help teach others that casual contact could not spread the disease. Michael Jackson even invited Ryan to his Neverland Ranch, welcoming him into his home. Elizabeth Taylor, a Hollywood icon, was an early activist in the AIDS fight. Influenced by Ryan as well as her friends and colleagues who struggled with AIDS, Miss Taylor established the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation in 1991. Her foundation raises money to provide care and support for those living with AIDS and educating people about the disease. One of the biggest impacts of Ryan's AIDS fight was the creation of the Comprehensive AIDS Resources Emergency Act of 1990 by the United States Congress. The CARE Act is designed to improve the quality and availability of medical care for people with HIV/AIDS. Ryan's mother, Jeannie White, and Elizabeth Taylor both testified in the United States Congress to fight for the Act's approval. It was passed in 1990, shortly after Ryan's death on April 9th. Of course, Ryan's biggest influence of his disease was on his mother. In addition to her work with the CARE Act, Miss White, after Ryan died, donated his room to the Indianapolis Children's Museum so that other children can know his story. She also speaks to many people about her story as a mom and educates people about family and community issues related to HIV/AIDS. She still works to continue Ryan's legacy. Ryan made an impact on healthcare.
Anywhere near where it is if it wasn't for the support of Ryan White. And I know that without question, this program here wouldn't even resemble what we have now.
Because of Ryan's work, people can now get the medications they need. Ryan also made an impact on how people act towards those with AIDS. When Ryan was first diagnosed with AIDS, the people he had known all his life were awful to him. Now, people know about AIDS and are not afraid as they were when Ryan was first diagnosed. Sadly, after a 5-year struggle, Ryan died from the complications of his AIDS in 1990. Many people came to Ryan's funeral, including Elton John, Michael Jackson, Phil Donahue, a well-known talk show host at the time, NFL star Howie Long, and First Lady Barbara Bush. During his tragic struggle with AIDS, all Ryan wanted was to be a regular kid. When he was first diagnosed, people were afraid to be close to him, but through his courageous fight and the influence he had on others, he was able to change the way people viewed AIDS and those living with the disease. Ryan was triumphant in his efforts to make AIDS a disease, not a dirty word.